I'm going to bring tonight two talks, two shorter talks instead of one longer thing. The first is a FileMaker specific. It's a technical presentation that will demonstrate a solution that I use in my databases that solves a specific problem. And then the second half will be more of a conceptual talk about some project management stuff. So I've been a FileMaker developer for about 15 years. I started in 2000, and I've been fortunate enough to play multiple roles in the FileMaker space. I started out as an in-house developer for an educational agency in Pennsylvania as part of the state system of education. I was in a regional agency serving about 22 school districts with a variety of technical and special education services. I became a FileMaker developer while I was there, along with a technology trainer, and I managed a lot of special ed data. And then in 2004, I moved on to become a consultant, and I started working for a company called IT Solutions, which is a FileMaker Platinum company in Philadelphia, which is about a 90-mile distance from my home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I live in Lancaster, which is it's sort of between Philly and Baltimore. You kind of think of it that way, to the southwest of, or just to the west of Philly and the north of Baltimore. So that's where I've lived since for about 15 years now. And I was with IT Solutions for a little over 7 years, and in the late 2011, early 2012, I transitioned out of IT Solutions and started my own company as an independent FileMaker developer. So I've had this experience of being in-house, of being a developer and one of the authorized trainers for a platinum company. Then I became a project manager at IT Solutions and managed the staff of developers. So I had that experience, and then went out on my own completely and have been an independent consultant ever since, which has been great because I got to see what the FileMaker world looks like from many different perspectives. When I went out on my own, the other thing that I got to do, which was really unique, was I was subcontracting as a PM for other FileMaker shops around the country, along with doing some training and coaching around implementing project management processes. So then I got to work for a handful of FileMaker Platinum companies, did some development with those different companies, did some project management with those different companies. So I got to see what it was like from a variety of perspectives. And it's really interesting how we all do the same thing, but nobody does it the same way at all. Very, very diverse approaches and philosophies out in the FileMaker world. So that's a little bit about me. The latest is I started a company about a year ago with Molly Connolly from Chicago, who is a pretty well-known figure in the FileMaker space. She's been a developer, DevCon speaker, and just a FileMaker personality for a couple decades. Molly and I started a company called Illusive Mousse, which is not a FileMaker company. It's actually a membership website and an annual conference that helps consultants build fulfilling consulting careers. So both she and I have done a lot of coaching over the years and a lot of training of business processes. So we brought those skill sets together and started this online resource and an annual conference to help other, not just development shops, but just consulting firms or independent consultants of a variety of types. So designers and marketing consultants and social media consultants, app developers, web developers, et cetera, all can benefit from the content that we're creating there. So Illusive Mousse is the latest adventure, but both Molly and I continue to run our own consulting firms. We both continue to be FileMaker people as well. So we're splitting our time at this point. That's my history. And from that, I've decided to pull together a FileMaker technique that I thought I would share with you. And I'm not sure what the makeup of the room is. I'm assuming we have a pretty good spectrum of FileMaker talent here. But one of the things that I learned when I was running a FileMaker developer meetup is that oftentimes when you bring in a speaker to talk specifically about FileMaker, some sort of FileMaker technique, the goal of that speaker is to come up with the most incredibly technical, innovative, abstract thing to sort of show off their expertise and their knowledge. I don't do that. because I often found that while a couple of advanced developers would be in the corner sort of whispering to themselves and saying like that, the rest of the room was sort of like, really? Like, am I really going to be able to use? I don't even know what you're saying. And I really just want something practical. My development style is pragmatic. I'm a very pragmatic developer. What that means in English is that FileMaker gives me lots of stuff that I get for free, and I want to develop to that. I want to make sure that I give my clients who are paying me to develop solutions the most functional piece of software that I can give them in the most efficient way. That's my philosophy. So I try not to overprogram. I don't hide the toolbar. I don't try to like script everything and tighten the interface down, because I want my users to have some flexibility there. I want them to be able to learn how to use FileMaker and to use my applications along with it. That's just the way that I've always done it and the way that I feel most comfortable doing it. It's not to cast judgment on anybody who might have a different philosophy. But with that in mind, I like to, even though I'm an advanced developer, I've been certified in all of the versions, and I've been doing it long enough, I don't program at some extreme technical level. I program at an intermediate level. And I do that for two reasons. The first is, well, primarily it's because I need to support it. So 6 months from now, when I get the call to work on my own stuff, and I've been working on all these other things, and I can go back and I can make sense of what it is that I've done. And I try to keep it at a very intermediate level. And the second reason is because oftentimes I might need somebody else to support it. So I have some subcontractors that I'll bring in occasionally when I get busy. And I try to, so along with the clients, because I'm a solo independent consultant at this point, I focus a lot on really, really small businesses. And part of the work that I do often includes somebody who's learning FileMaker or wants to be able to do some of the stuff themselves. So I try to keep the development, I try to keep all of the scripting and all that stuff at a pretty easy to support level. That's just to give you some background. So what I'm going to show you here is not super complicated at all, but it's one of the things that I think really highlights the power of FileMaker and the platform that we all use. And that is that you can pull together all these little features that FileMaker gives us, right? And you can pull it together into what I would consider a very elegant solution, a very elegant solution to a problem. And we can solve those problems in a way that isn't incredibly complicated, can be somewhat reusable, as I'll explain, and I think creates a really nice user experience. So the problem that I want to solve for you tonight, and I want to share with you, is the problem of when I have too many records in a particular table in order to use a drop-down list or a pop-up menu effectively. I love drop-down lists. I love the, pop-up menus, all that sort of thing. When you have a couple dozen, maybe at the most, values. But when we have a table that needs to, like our contacts table would typically become, where I might have thousands and thousands of records, and I need to assign a contact record to another record, right? I need to make that connection, and I've got 10,000 records. A pop-up menu or a drop-down list starts to become inefficient. We run into some problems. A problem in this case, right? I have 500 records in a contacts table in this database. So it's not a huge problem, right? One could argue if I have to scroll a little bit, I can do some type ahead, right? I can just type a couple characters. I can move down the list, okay? Windows doesn't handle pop-up menus and drop-down lists quite as elegantly. WebDirect is a problem, period. If I select it and I want to use an ID, right, and I'm using a drop-down list, then I have to deal with this, which we've all dealt with, right? We've layered fields on top of other fields. We've, shown the ID here and shown the related value over here, and it's not the end of the world, right? But not super elegant. Same thing then with the pop-up menu. I can type a couple characters, but look, I mean, this isn't very nice. I don't want to do that, right, all the time and see this huge list, especially if there were 10,000 records. I get to take advantage of the fact that I can assign an ID number without seeing it. That's good news, right? And that would work in some cases. But the third problem and the big problem that this addresses in my mind is that I think it's a pretty intuitive thing for a user in this scenario to want to add a contact to their contacts database from that perspective. So in other words, if I've got a new contact that needs to go into this database and be assigned to this record, and I click on my drop-down list and I do my little type ahead and that person isn't in there, that I as a user would go, well, I just want to add a new one. And me as a FileMaker person might say, oh, all you have to do is just go over to the contacts table, add the new person, fill in all the information, come back here, click your drop-down menu, and then type ahead, and that's all. What's the problem? And then the knowledge worker who's making the request gives me the dirty look, and we move on. So I wanted to give, I wanted to provide the, so that's a common, is that a common problem? Am I, yeah? I mean, this isn't out of the ordinary, and over the years, we've come up with different ways of dealing it, but some of these features that we've gotten introduced to recently, I think really helps address this problem. Script triggers, a popover, the portal filters, this install on timer script, which you'll see how I use, that's kind of interesting. And then the slide, like we've got all these little things that we can pull together and create a fairly elegant solution. So when you see these new features come along down the FileMaker path, you start to put them together in your head, and that's what I did to solve that problem. So I'm gonna flip to a couple screens here, demonstrate how this works under two scenarios, right? I want to create a solution where I want to assign the contact to a program. So program is just a generic record for whatever, right? It could be a department, this could be a classroom, and this is a teacher, but it's where I want to assign an owner or a single contact to a program. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is where I want to assign multiple contacts to a program. Or if this was like a classroom, these would be students. I want to build a team on that program record. So those are the two scenarios where this would come into play. And I'm going to do it in a way that uses these features, script triggers, popover, etc. So let me move over to my first scenario. My first scenario, this is the program record, program ID 100. And this is my field. So again, my goal is to make things as simple as possible for my users. I want things to be intuitive. So based on what you see here, you've never seen this database before tonight, I don't think. Which button would I click to add a new program owner? Anyone? Yeah, the green one, right? It's the green button. So this is intuitive so far. It feels pretty good. So I click it, and I get the popover. Just clear that out. Same fields that were in my, the first name and the last name. I've got an additional field here, which is cool, my email field, and I could put any column there that I want. So instead of having a drop down, now I'm saying to my user, and remember, I've got 500 records. What if I had 10,000 or whatever, right? What if I had a lot more? So I hit the popover. I have this list, and it's essentially the same as my drop downs at this point, right? I'm scrolling through, I'm sorting by last name here, and when I click it, I assign the record. No big deal. Let me pop that open again. Difference is now I've got this up here, which is a filter, and I think that's a pretty common convention, right? There's a thing at the top, I can type a few. So let me find a name here, Alfred, or try another one, Mullis. All right, you see what's going on is I'm searching a text string in either of these two fields. So I can type something and it filters down. It's nice, right? I think it kind of makes sense to the user. And what's the benefit of being able to type in one field and search on whatever columns I see is that I could put something like a phone number in there. I could put a social security number, you can put whatever columns that you want, and you could just use the same field to search for it. performance could degrade if you added a lot of calculated fields on the back. Like, I want to show you how to do it. It's a calculated field that does it, but if they're stored, you know, if there's stored values within that other table, and then the calculation, it's not too bad. I have a lot of clients who use like FMP host and these other, you know, third-party shared servers over the WAN, and I've got this thing implemented in pretty much every solution. Now, granted, nobody's extreme. There's no 3.8 million records, right? These are small businesses. They've got 5,000, 10,000 records in most tables, and I have not had a performance issue with this yet. So you see the concept, you understand what's going on here, right? Type some stuff in. Now I've got this set so that it's actually just doing a text string search. So it can pull from anywhere in there, any combination of characters. But again, this solves my problem, and it pulls together a few features. Let me show you what's going on, and we'll break it down. So the first thing to point out is that I've got relationships. I'm going to talk about these first two sections first, then we'll look at the scripts. And there's a handful of scripts here, but most of them are like a single step script, and there's a reason to put them in a script. I've got a relationship between program and contact that it's Cartesian. It's got the X, right? So which just means, if you're not familiar, it means it's going to show me all the records regardless. There's not a match field between the two. And I'm doing that to drive the portal, so that whenever I look at the choices I have, I can see a list of all of them. And then I'm going to filter that portal to shrink that list down. To do that, I'm using two fields. One field is in my program, we'll say the left side of that relationship, and that's a global field, and that's the field that I'm typing in the filter. And on the other side of the relationship, on the contact side of the relationship, I have a calculated field that we just were discussing, which is a concatenation of whatever fields I want to search on. So those elements are what make up the portal sorting or filtering and display. So let me show you how that's set up. Here's the match field, very simple, right? Literally just bringing together whatever fields I want to search on. So if I had a phone number field on there, I would just throw the phone number in there as well. And you'll see where that match is taking place. Inside the portal is a filter calculation. Break this down a little bit here. So the calculation is, if my global is empty, then return a 1. That means show them all. Because it's not as intuitive for me to pop that open and have nothing. I see that there's a list of names. One might argue that, but that's how I've approached it. Otherwise, do a pattern count and say whatever's in that global field, if it exists in the match field, return a 1 and show it. That's it. All right. So very simple calculation that just looks for whatever I've typed in, and if it matches, it matches. Great. Now let's go to the scripts. I have 5 scripts that are driving this, and there's a couple of them that are script triggers, and I have those. I name the scripts. I put the trigger on there so you have a sense that this is being fired by a script trigger. So when we open the contact selector, it's running on object enter. And actually, for this part of the solution, for this simple solution, it's really not doing anything at all. All I'm doing is I'm clearing globals that I'm actually going to use in my add on the fly, but I use the same script for each option. Oh, I lost it there, sorry. So it's just clearing these globals that I'm going to use to add a new one, and then it's refreshing the window. So it's just refreshing, giving me a fresh window. That's the first script. The second and third script. Well, let me circle back. Let me circle back to those two. So the next one is the clear contact selector filter. This button here is the clear. And it's literally just clearing it, right? Then it's performing this script called refresh contact selector filter, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And then it goes back to the filter field. So it's clearing it, refreshing my screen, and going back to the filter. And then I've got a script assigned to this portal row that submits. Right, I'm selecting the contact from the popover. And that's a very simple script as well. I'm on the program record, and this is the foreign key, the owner ID. So I'm just saying, whatever row I click on, set the record's foreign key ID with whatever the primary key is underneath it. Does that make sense? Right, pretty easy. Just click it, just set in a field. And then I close the popover and refresh the window. So not a whole lot of magic going on there. I wanted to circle back to this first one because it's probably the most interesting thing that's happening in this solution, which is it's being triggered off of our global field here. So what happens is, let me show you what the trigger is. It's called load contact selector filter. All right, that's the script. Let me edit that for you. So what this is doing is it's running the install on timer. How many people use install on timer regularly? Couple, 3, 4. So it's often used, right, to just sort of do something every couple of minutes. And I found this solution somewhere a couple of years ago. This particular thing, I was trying to resolve a problem, to use it in the way that I'm using it. So I'm not going to take credit for it. But unfortunately, I can't remember who to credit for it. It's just been so long. So I don't know, somebody mentioned it somewhere in a forum, or I was talking to somebody about it and they said to do this. In any event, what's going on is I'm firing off this refresh filter script, and I'm setting the interval for 0.3 seconds. So the purpose of this was, when I initially worked on this solution, it was a hosted solution. It was like a Citrix environment, right, over the WAN, really thick, like application, like super heavy graphics, like just a lot of performance issues or whatever. And what would happen is, you know, the instinct when you're doing those type ahead filters is you fire on keystroke, right? And you know what happens when you have latency, right? You hit a key, it fires off a script, and then if you type like Jason, JS1, then you hit it stops at J, fires the script and waits, and then either gives you that, you know, what is that thing where if you start typing but you haven't put the focus anywhere, you get that error, or the whole thing it doesn't work. The bottom line is it just doesn't work. The script's trying to go and you're trying to type ahead. So I was like, boy, how do I resolve that? That's what this does, is you fire off this and it waits 0.3 seconds to fire off the other script, which in this solution's case is the amount of time that feels comfortable, right, for me to type a bunch of stuff and then fire off the script. And I'm going to demonstrate it. So you can see exactly what's happening. I'm going to set this to 5 seconds instead of 0.3 seconds. I'm going to set it to 5 seconds. Okay. So I'm going to go back, open up my popover, and I'm going to type the word Jason. So Jason. So that was 5 seconds. It's a long 5 seconds. Felt like a long 5 seconds. So that was 5 seconds. So by setting it to 0.3 seconds, it's giving me just enough time to type some stuff and then fire off. And it feels kind of intuitive at that. Now, let me show you what's going on behind that so you can see what is actually happening. What's happening is I commit the record, I flush it, and go to the filter. And the flush resets my portal filter, right? And then I hit install on timer script with no script to turn off the timer. So I'm only firing it once. right? This would be analogous to like when you use a loop as a validation trick. Like a loop intuitively is like, it's a loop. It's going to loop through a bunch of stuff. But when you use it to validate things, you're really just firing it off once and saying if, you know, if the data entry doesn't match whatever I want it to match, loop back around. Otherwise, keep going. So in that, it's similar to that, right? I'm firing it off for the timing and then turning it off immediately so it doesn't fire again. So install on timer script is a great use for that. When I set this back to 0.3, which I can't remember if I did. Did I? No. So I'm going to set this back to 0.3, and then you'll see how it works properly. And you know, depending on your solution, you might play around with that timing just a little bit, little 0.1 up, 0.1 down, that sort of thing, just so till it feels natural. But again, I use this in solutions on shared servers over the WAN, and it's between 0.3 and 0.5 is typically fine. So now I can type in JSON, and then you see how fast it fires because it's just doing it at 0.3 seconds, right? And it feels really natural. So that's the first solution. And by the way, I'm going to give this to Kevin, this file, and he can post it on the meetup, or maybe I can just do it. I guess right on the meetup, I'll post it in the files, and you can download. It's wide, you know, it's wide open. You can do whatever you want with it. Copy and paste the stuff out. So the select, we talked about these. The select contact is when I click the row. The clear contact is when I click the X to clear the filter. Any questions? Yeah, the way that I do that is I parameterize those scripts. So in other words, there's one set of scripts for contacts, right? There's one set of scripts for the contact piece that uses the contact filter match and that sort of thing. But if I put it in a different context, like from programs, and then maybe I want to assign contacts to my departments, or I want to assign contacts to something else, I just put I put an if. And in fact, I don't have it in here because I kept this really, really simple. But in the ones that I kind of moved from my solutions, one solution to the next solution, even has like have you ever worked in seed code? But John will put like the else if XXXXX, so you kind of know that the next, like it's already kind of set up for you, and you can just sort of duplicate that. So I have it all set up to parameterize that. I've been using this for a few years now, and so yeah, I just kind of do it that way. And but let me go on to the next one, and this scenario then does a very similar thing, right? But in this case, I'm actually building like a team, right? I'm adding a bunch of records, and I'm building my team. Now I'm graying these out because this is all exactly the same, right? Nothing different there. There's a line through this one because I'm not using the local table select, which just assigns it to the foreign key. I've got to use a different script, which deals with the join table. So let's take a look at that one first. Again, nothing earth-shattering going on in here. Grabbing my program ID because that's the context, right? That's the record I'm on. Grabbing my contact ID out of the portal. Click the row, I get that. And then I go over to program assignment, which is my join between the two. Add a new record, drop in my foreign keys, and come back. That's it. The popover is gone because I left the layout and I came back to the layout. And I'm just adding join records and dropping the foreign keys in. Now, that kind of makes it a little bit more intuitive for maybe a new user than the long 1,000, 2,000 person drop-down list. But it doesn't address my new record on the fly. But here I've got the little plus button saying, which says to my user, if it ain't in here, click that button, right? I want to add a new one. And this is where these are those global fields that I cleared on when the popover opens, right? And maybe I have 10 fields, whatever. Maybe I do the whole contact form. Now, a couple things that are going on here. And if you haven't used them, they're really awesome, the slider. So on here is a slider that has 2 panels, and I'm hiding the stuff, so you know it doesn't look like you're just moving between the slider. And so what happens is that 2 of these scripts are literally just one step that is taking me from one slider to the next. So you know, here's the name of my slider. That panel is called New Contact Slider, and if I go back to the other panel, it's called Select Contact Slider. You see how that changes up there? For those in the back. So the plus button, all the plus button is doing is firing off a single step script that says go to that object. Right, that's it. Because I'm just switching to the other slider, and then the cancel button on that slider just comes back and forth. So it's a little trickery. You're not really canceling, you're just moving. Little FileMaker magic. So that's the add and the cancel, right? And again, those could just be single steps, but I might want to do something fancy with them later. I might want to expand that. When I get over there, I might want to go to a particular field. I might want to auto enter some stuff, whatever. Just might be some things that I want to do. So I have them broken out into scripts so that I can just grab this folder and pop it into another place, another solution. The submit is where things get a little bit trickier, and oh, I didn't mean to do that, did I? The submit is the script that when I submit new, the longest script in the solution. I grab the program ID, freeze the window, go to the contact table. Now I add a new record in the contact table. So I'm grabbing the values out of the global, hop over to the contact table, and then drop those global values into my contact fields. Now I can grab the contact ID, which I didn't have because I'm not clicking the portal row. I grab the contact ID from my new record and then do the same thing that my other script did, which is go to the join table, create the record, drop in the foreign keys. So that resolves my problem of, well, I need the new record to be in the database. I need it to be added to the contact database and be assigned to my program on the fly. So to demonstrate how that works, I go over here, click the plus button, say, put in my info, fill it all out, hit submit. It added me to the portal row, and it also dropped my record right down here into the contact table. You can see it at the very bottom there. So if I unassign if I unassign this person, they're still going to be in my contacts table. So again, the script is wide open to add things like validation. If I want to prevent, if I want to prevent you from clicking the submit button until all the required fields are filled out, I can do whatever I want at that point, right? I can, because I'm using these globals to set it. So this solution here, as far as building a team, that resolves all the problems that I had at the beginning. And I think it's a nice, elegant, user-friendly solution that if I handed this solution off to a brand new customer who's never used FileMaker, would probably be able to walk through there and know how to add a new customer. Maybe I would be a little bit more descriptive and say add new contact instead of just the little green plus button, but even so. Here are some comments and caveats. These are the features used: the script triggers, the popover, portal filter, install on timer script, and slider. Maybe a couple others in there, but those are the ones that I thought were interesting. You can copy and paste the folder and use parameters. That's what I mentioned here earlier with Kevin. The caveat is the two methods on the same layout would require parameters or some different fields. Because if you try to go to, if I got that filter on two different popovers and I try to go back to the filter, then it's going to go to the first one, whatever that is, the top left corner. But like I said, for the most part, now I know the solution, right? So my head's wrapped around it, which means that when I copy and paste this into a new solution, it doesn't take me but a few minutes to sort of fix up the scripts and I'm off and running. Works really well. I think that in the most recent versions, some of this new user interface stuff has really been a dramatic improvement. If you've been using the platform for a long time, you know, and work through some of the older days, boy, you know, it feels really good. Like I've got a few solutions out there in Go, and you know, it's like it's nice. You know what I mean? I get some really good feedback about the way that the thing behaves and the way it works, and people are really impressed by it. One of my clients actually uses the Go app as a differentiator. So it's really a sales tool, meaning they say, this is the tool we use to do our analysis, and they get clients because they're impressed. The clients are like, wow, you guys have like a custom, you know, a custom app that is really, really rich. It's not just like a single function app. Like they're doing all kinds of stuff on it. They're doing this analysis, taking photos. It spits out this great big report. It's a really nice solution. So that's kudos to FileMaker in that regard. I mean, I think that the interface stuff in the latest versions are really nice. And that concludes part 1 of this evening's program.